Provided attention. If you haven't yet, check your phones to make sure they're turned off. If you have small children that love to play, that's what they're supposed to do. But we can tune into the class online and find nice arrangements for them. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaridhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaridhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tiram Vanachari. Jamuna Tiram Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaridhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tiram Vanachari. Jamuna Tiram Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gaur Premanandi Haribo. Thank you.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasta Praishvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Right, we are reading this morning from the first canto, but it doesn't seem to be on the screen yet, is that? Lost the internet. Oh, okay, well, class is canceled, I'm sorry. All right, so this is verse number 8 in the 9th chapter of the first canto. If you want to return on your phones for that purpose, feel free. 198. 198. Why don't we start with the synonyms while everyone's booting up? Anye, many others. Cha, also. Munaya, sages. Brahman, O Brahmanas. Brahmarta, Shukadev Goswami. Adaya, and such others. Amalaha, completely purified. Shishyai, by the disciples. Upetaha, accompanied. Ajagmu, arrived. Kashyapa, Angirasa, Adayaha, and others. Anyecha Munaya Praman Brahmaratadayo Mula. Let's try that again. Brahmaratadaya Malam Dayo Malam Shishyair Upeta Ajagmu Kashyapangirasadaya Anyecha Munaya Brahman Brahmarata Dayo Malaha Shishyair Upeta Ajagmu Kashyapagirasadaya. Okay, please chant. Anyecha Munayo Brahma Anyecha Munayo Brahma Upeta Ajagmu. Turn it off. Anyecha Munayo Brahma Brahma Upeta Ajagmu. Asya Agni Sadaya. Anyone else? Anecha Munaya Praman. Yomala. Yapeta Ajagmu. Kasyapan Girisadaya. Okay, anyone else? All right, translation, please repeat. And many others, like Shukadeva Goswami, and other purified souls, Kashyapa and Angirasa, and others, all accompanied by the respective disciples, arrived there. And where were they arriving? Yes, at the passing of Bhishma Day. Report by Srila Prabhupada. Shukadeva Goswami, Brahma Rata, the famous son and disciple of Sri Vyasadeva, who taught him first the Mahabharata and then Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadeva Goswami recited 1,400,000 verses of the Mahabharata in the councils of the Gandharvas, Yakshas, and Rakshasas, and he recited Srimad Bhagavatam for the first time in the presence of Maharaj Parikshit. He thoroughly studied all the Vedic literatures from his great father. Thus he was a completely purified soul by dint of his extensive knowledge in the principles of religion. From the Mahabharata, Shabha Parva, it is understood that he was also present in the royal assembly of Maharaj Yudhisthira and at the fasting of Maharaj Parikshit. So I'm going to skip the next portion and we'll get back to that. Sometimes he went to the sun planet with the permission of his father and Naradaji. Descriptions of his travel in space are given in the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata. At last he attained the transcendental realm. He is known by different names like Araneya, Iruni Sutta, Vyasaki, and Vyasatmaja. Kashyapa, one of the Prajapatis, who are some famous sons of Kashyapa, just celebrated his disappearance day. Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, yes. Okay. One of the Prajapatis, the son of Marichi, and one of the sons-in-law of Prajapati Daksha. He is the father of the gigantic bird Garuda, who was given elephants and tortoises as eatables. He married 13 daughters of Prajapati Daksha, and their names are Aditi, Diti, Danu, Kashta, Arishta, Surasa, Ila, Muni, Prodavasa, Tamra, Surabi, Sarama, and Timi. He begot many children, both demigods and demons, by those wives. From his first wife, Aditi, all the 12 Adityas were born. One of them is Vamana, the incarnation of Godhead, and this great sage Kashyapa, who was also present. This great sage Kashyapa was also present at the time of Arjuna's birth. He received a presentation of the whole world from Parasaram, and later on he asked Parasaram to go out of the world. That's not very nice. Sounds like a teenager. Thanks for the house, Dad. Now would you please leave? His other name is Arishtanemi. He lives on the northern side of the universe. And finally, Angirasa. He is the son of Maharshi Angira and is known as Brihaspati, the priest of the demigods. It is said that Dronacharya was his partial incarnation. Interesting, huh? Drona, the martial guru of the Pandavas and the Kurus. Sukracharya was the spiritual master of the demons, and Brihaspati challenged him. His son is Kacha, and he delivered the fire weapon first to Bharadwaj Muni. He begot 6 sons, like the fire god, by his wife Chandramasi, one of the reputed stars. He could travel in space, and therefore he could present himself even in the planets of Brahmaloka and Indraloka. He advised the king of heaven, Indra, about conquering the demons. Once he cursed Indra, who thus had to become a hog on the earth and was unwilling to return to heaven. Such is the power of the attraction of the illusory energy. Even a hog does not wish to part with its earthly possessions in exchange for a heavenly kingdom. He was the religious preceptor of the natives of different planets. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I'm always struck to remember how Srila Prabhupada is writing these purports alone in Vrindavan with no followers, no resources, just writing with no idea that anyone would ever read these books or if they would ever be even printed. So he said for that reason he put everything into the first canto. That's why these purports are particularly important. So, on Tuesday, actually this week, I had the pleasure of going out with Bhakti Marg Swami in Canada, along with the students and teachers in the Bhakti Academy there. He took us on a field trip to a place called Sainte Marie in mid-northern Ontario. And this was a recreation of an Indian village from the 1600s that had been ministered to by Jesuit priests from France. So the French had built houses with their standard construction, and the Indians had their own native housing. So both were there. And many of the guides who were showing us around were actually descendants from that Indian tribe. So they were very knowledgeable about the way of life that these people embraced. So they lived, although the French lived in wooden houses. They made little monasteries, little Krishna house type of setup with a meeting room, a dining room, and then a chapel for worship, all out of wood. The Indians lived in these houses made out of local materials with earthen floors. And the French had stone fireplaces. The Indians built fires in the middle of the ground. So the Indians thought the French houses were very strange, and they didn't like to go in them because they considered wood to be sacred. So they did not want to set foot on this sacred substance. The earth was meant for standing on. Anyway, the two learned a lot from each other and managed to coexist for some time until they were completely wiped out by another tribe. And the Jesuits were all killed, and the tribe was broken up. Plus the diseases that the French brought with them wiped out 80% of the population, smallpox and others. So nonetheless, it was fascinating to see how these Indians lived during that time, because their houses were called long houses, and they're kind of like an arched structure about maybe 20 feet high, and with holes under which they built fires directly underneath. So the winters there are 8 months long. We barely see the sun, and always snowbound with temperatures of 30 degrees, 40 degrees below zero. So you wonder, how could they survive in this environment? And so the family structure was built around the fire. Each family had their own fire, and their own kids would be around the fire. And when one of the kids grew and married, then they would get a fire next to the first fire. So these were like extended families, many generations with multiple fires. And whenever there was a marriage, they would, in the summertime, add another 15 feet to the house so that they would have their space for their fire and family. So all of these simple living conditions where it was very difficult to go outside. They would stock up on food and wood during the summer, and then they would stay more or less inside for 8 months in these very kind of smoky but warm places. So I asked one of the guides, what did they do during this time? How would they keep themselves busy for 8 months? And I heard the internet connections were poor. So they showed us they had little games. The children would play little games, and they would run around. The kids would run all up and down the longhouses. But mostly they would depend upon the elders to tell the audio history, to narrate the history of the family and the tribe and their legends. So that was how they were entertained. That would keep them occupied and absorbed, and this way it would just pass from generation to generation. until the Europeans came in and wiped it out, more or less. So how can you imagine just being able to live indoors for 8 months and to be so interested to hear that you would just be able to sit for hours and listen to a narration? So how many here, of course, not in this class, but sometimes in Bhagavatam classes, struggle to pay attention? Okay. Now, how many here had television in their families growing up? Seems about a similar number here. So this is one of the downsides of Kali Yuga, that we are just hit with so much visual and audio stimulation to keep us interested. So we'll buy stuff that our attention span just grows shorter and shorter with successive generations. Therefore, it's very difficult to hear. Srila Prabhupada writes about paying rapt attention to Srimad Bhagavatam. He said, in order to listen with rapt attention, one must have a pure mind. In order to have a pure mind, one must have a pure heart. So the beginning of recovering some of our dwindling attention span comes from following the regulative principles, and then chanting japa, because the japa helps us focus the mind. In the 7th canto, in the longest purport in Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada gives an elaborate description of the archanam process. Prahlad Maharaj, answers his father, "What did you learn today, son?" "Oh, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam." So in the archanam section, Prabhupada talks about the 5 stages of concentration on the deity form. And the first have to deal with the general ability to concentrate. That's the point. The more advanced ones identify a specific form, and then being very able to visualize that form constantly, and then to actually interact with the form. These are the stages of archanam. But the first one is just the raw ability to concentrate. So concentrating on Srimad Bhagavatam is an enormous austerity. I remember I had the good fortune of hearing Srila Prabhupada giving class on maybe 30 or 40 occasions in Mayapur and Vrindavan, Hyderabad, in Los Angeles and Chicago. And these places, when you listen to Prabhupada, you knew it was a really precious opportunity. It was like having a bunch of money but not knowing how to spend it. What am I going to do to take advantage of this very rare and precious opportunity? So I've just gotten the habit of bringing a notebook, because it would be difficult to concentrate. As much as it was a powerful experience, and it was sometimes hard to concentrate and follow. So I would take copious notes every class. Whatever he said, I would just write it down. Going back to those notes years later, there was virtually nothing in the notes that was not in the books. It wasn't that he was giving these creative and unusual presentations. And we hear in his lectures often him saying, "As I have said many times," right? So just as these stories in the longhouses were repeated over and over again, and people would never tire of hearing about them until they became so assimilated that they could present them to their own children. In the same way, hearing these pastimes over and over again is part of the process of really internalizing them. And yet, because of our restless minds, we think, "Oh, I heard that, I know that." One of my godbrothers was saying, there was another speaker, he was encouraging him to tell the story of Nrsingadev and Hiranyakashipu. And he says, "No, they've heard that already." I want to say something else. So we have this challenge to make classes interesting and yet at the same time faithful to the tradition. Why? Because just by hearing them, we are purified. One of the lectures I heard Srila Prabhupada give was in Hindi, and that was really tough, of course. Because none of us spoke Hindi. It was in Hyderabad, and he was addressing a large crowd at a pandal, speaking in Hindi, which was the only language the majority understood. And of course, not knowing Hindi, we Western disciples were sitting there on the stage, struggling not only to listen with rapt attention, but to stay awake in that rather, erratic schedule. So, there was a lot of pinching and pounding of the fire. And we couldn't stand up. So and yet, Prabhupada said that even hearing languages we don't understand, hearing the Bhagavatam in other languages, it still has that purifying effect. When Srila Prabhupada came to New York, actually it was Boston Harbor, in 1965 on the Jaladuta, the captain took him off the boat and showed him around the city for a while. That was his first exposure to America. So after that, he came on the boat and wrote a Markini Bhagavat Dharma, preaching Krishna consciousness in America. And in that poem, he expresses a great deal of helplessness. How can I convince these people who are totally in the modes of nature? How can I convince them? Only you can make my words appropriate for this purpose. And then in the middle of his poem, he quoted some verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. Does anyone know the first verse that he quoted? Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna. Yes, Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna. That's from the first canto, second chapter, verse 17. Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, Hridyantaksto Hibhadrani Vidunoti Sarit Satam. And this verse means that if we just hear these messages about Krishna, that Krishna in the heart purifies unwanted things. So it is a dynamic process. We do have to give oral reception. We've got to hear. But then the active ingredient is Krishna. We don't have the ability to purify ourselves. We have to accept the process and allow Krishna to work his magic from within. It is kind of, in a sense, a helpless relationship in the sense that we don't have the ability yet except by Krishna's mercy. So this is what Prabhupada expressed in his poem, and this was the first verse he thought of in the daunting task of sharing Krishna consciousness with others. So sometimes devotees feel like I'm listening, I'm hearing, but I'm not retaining much. Anyone ever have this feeling? So there's a story about a sage who was giving lectures on Bhagavatam, and one older lady was coming and hearing his classes. And after class one day, she went to him and said, Maharaj, I love listening to your classes, but I just can't remember a thing. And so the sage said, don't worry about it. I'll tell you what to do. Tomorrow, bring me a basket of Ganga water, and I will tell you how to retain. So she said, a basket of Ganga water? She said, just bring me a basket of Ganga water. So the next day, she came with an empty basket, and she said, well, Maharaj, I went to the Ganga, and I tried to fill it up, and of course, it didn't hold anything. I tried and tried again and again, didn't hold any water. I did the best I could. And the sage said, yes, but now your basket is clean. So by hearing, we do get purified, and Krishna then has a chance to work from within the heart. Did you observe Jayananda Prabhu's disappearance day the other day? Yes. So Jayananda Prabhu was an amazing person. He was just a pillar in the temple. I didn't get a chance to see him often, but I did interview all the devotees who knew him well, or many devotees who knew him well just after his departure, just to make a little record of his life. And so that in those interviews, devotees were explaining how Jayananda Prabhu would be like first one up, last one to bed. When he would chant, he was just all concentration, because at first he was supporting the temple by driving a cab. So he had this habit of just sitting down and chanting 16 rounds in one place very loudly, shaking his head, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. And he said he had to do that to just get rid of all the prajalpa he would hear in the cab all day. So he was staunch in chanting. He did all the most difficult tasks in the temple, whatever needed to be done, fixing the cars, emptying the garbage, buying produce, and then setting up Rath Yatra. One time he took a crew of men out to a big hillside in the middle of the night, 1 or 2 in the morning, with white paint, and they painted on the boulders on the hillside, Hare Krishna Festival, Golden Gate Park, and the date. So the police came the next day. We have lots of friends. Somebody must have. He was that sort of personality. He had so much bhakti for Prabhupada. Actually, he was suicidal before he met Srila Prabhupada. He had an engineering degree from Ohio State, very good university, but he had no reason for living. And when he met Prabhupada, it just transformed his life. He was so grateful. However, he was not much for Sanskrit. He wasn't much of a scholar. He would love to listen, and he knew the philosophy very well, but when it came to remembering slokas, he was not very good. In fact, once he was sitting with some devotees, my godbrother Sridhar Maharaj told me the story. We all sat down to say Gayatri. 30 seconds later, Jayananda stands up and goes back to the service. And generally, Gayatri will take at least 3 to 5 minutes. So Sridhar Maharaj asked him, he said, "That was the fastest Gayatri I've ever seen." He said, "Yeah, I can't remember a word of it." So then Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was there at the time, he told him, he said, "Yes, I was with Jayananda in San Francisco. When I got my second initiation, I went up, I was going to see Srila Prabhupada. Jayananda asked if he could come along. He already had his second initiation, but he wanted a refresher in the Gayatri. So they both went up. Srila Prabhupada said, "Yes, I'll start with Jayananda." So Prabhupada would repeat the first line of the Gayatri, Om Bhur Bhava, and say, "Jayananda, you repeat it." For half an hour, he was trying. And then Prabhupada smiled and said, "It is hopeless." But because you are sincere, whatever you say, Krishna will accept it. So what this means, it is more the quality of our sincerity and our desire to understand Krishna, please Krishna, that counts, and not necessarily what we may learn academically. Some devotees are very strong academically, others are not. The important thing is, are we willing to hear and allow Krishna to work from within the heart? I want to test you all a little bit in that regard. Is that all right? Again, in this purport, one of these classic purports Prabhupada's writing there in Radha Damodar Temple in Vrindavan, he summarizes more or less the entire Srimad Bhagavatam in this purport. He says, as a bona fide disciple of Sri Vyasadeva, Shukadeva Goswami inquired from his father very extensively about religious principles and spiritual values, and his great father satisfied him by teaching him. And then he gives a long list of all the things that Vyasadeva taught him. It's one of the longest sentences I can remember in Prabhupada's purports, like a full paragraph in one sentence. So I want to ask if anyone randomly can think of an example from Srimad Bhagavatam, from your reading and your hearing of each of these different lessons. Is that all right? Okay, you call them out and I'll repeat them. Okay. Vyasa taught Sukadeva the yoga system by which one can attain the spiritual kingdom. Examples. Dhruva Maharaj. The difference between fruitive work and empiric knowledge. Kapila. What? Prajapati Daksha, okay. Also Priyavrata, we might do an example, okay. The ways and means of attaining spiritual realization. Narada Muni, good. Okay. Practically can answer any question with Narada Muni. The 4 ashrams, namely student life, householder life, retired life, and renounced life. Where's instructions to Yudhisthira in the 7th canto? Okay. The sublime position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 10th canto? Yeah? How about the 111? What's that? 1328, yeah, the Mahavakya, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. The very first verse of Bhagavatam, doesn't it? Start off with Janas. What's the first verse? Janmadyasya yatonvaya. Yes. The process of seeing Krishna eye to eye. Okay, Dhruva again. Any others? Prahlad Maharaj? Narada Muni, our default answer to all questions. The bona fide candidate for receiving knowledge. Parikshit, great deal about Parikshit. The first canto is really all about the background for Parikshit, learning about Krishna, and then we don't hear a word from Sukadeva Goswami in the entire first canto. Not one word. We hear about him, but he doesn't say anything until the beginning of the second canto. The consideration of the 5 elements. Kapila? Yeah, the Virat Rupa in the second canto and other places. Good. Okay. The unique position of intelligence. Paranjana, that's nice too. Yeah, yeah. What was Paranjana's, the king's relationship with intelligence? Intelligence was his wife. Take note. Okay. Yeah, all sorts of jokes about married life, like before I was married, I was incomplete. Then I got married, and I was finished. But, yes, the wife was the intelligence. The consciousness of the material nature and the living entity. Consciousness of the material nature and the living entity. In other words, the relationship between the two. Any examples you can think of where this is described? That's also nice. You've been reading 4th canto. Just very good. Excellent. That's a beautiful example. Consciousness of the living entity. How about from Bhagavad Gita? Anyone think of a verse in which the consciousness of the living entity is described in relation to the material nature? There's several, but anyone think of any examples? Avamsa Jivaloke, that's an excellent one, yes. In 13th chapter, Purusham Prakriti Stohi. The living entity enjoys different varieties of life while trying to enjoy material nature. Okay? The symptoms of the self-realized soul. Where do we find that in Srimad Bhagavatam? Rishabdev in 5th canto. What are you thinking of specifically? Bharat Maharaj. In the later in the 5th canto. Okay. Any other examples? The 11th canto, yes, in the Uddhava Gita. Yes. Prahlad Maharaj. Pardon me? Avanti Brahman, yes. Right. Good, so many examples. Also in the Gita we find this, right? Arjuna asks the qualities, in the 2nd chapter he asks what are the symptoms of a self-realized soul, and then Krishna explains, prajadati hida kaman sarvapartha manogatan, when the mind is no longer disturbed by the comings and goings of the material nature, and finds satisfaction in the self alone. Then there's so many. So, the working principles of the material body. Okay, yes, in the 3rd canto, Kapila Dev's teachings, you think of, that's really where it's described in detail, right? Yeah, the birth of a living entity, how starting from conception, development. The working principles of, the symptoms of the influential modes of nature. Any examples? Symptoms of the influence of nature. Okay, I'm thinking anything more specific, like specifically about the 3 modes. What is that? 11th canto, yeah. 11th canto is considered Krishna's mind. You know, the 1st and 2nd canto are the lotus feet, the 3rd and 4th canto are the legs, the 5th canto is the midsection, 6th canto is the trunk, the heart, holy name. 7th and 8th cantos are the arms, the 9th canto is the neck, 10th canto is the smiling face, the 11th canto is the mind, and the 12th canto is the crown or the peacock feather on his head. So the Uddhava Gita in the 11th canto has 27 chapters, I believe, and it covers all the Bhagavad Gita topics in more depth, including the influence of the modes. Great detail. Okay, we're almost finished here. The tree of perpetual desire. Ururava and Purvasi in the 9th canto, right? Yayati, yes. Okay, the tree of perpetual desire. Is there any, of course we know in the 15th chapter, the tree of the material world is described, the banyan tree. Any other trees you can think of from the Bhagavatam? Is this example used anywhere? I'm not sure what Prabhupada's referring to exactly. Yes, knowledge is an axe in the Gita. But I'm wondering also, do you think though this might mean the opposite, the tree of perpetual desire, meaning like a kalpavriksha tree? The tree of perpetual desire. So another topic. Anyway, and the last one's even more challenging. Ready? Psychic activities. Vyasadeva taught Shukadev psychic activities. What does that refer to? Chitralekha. Do you remember Chitralekha? Chitralekha was the friend of Usha, yes. And Usha had a dream about this boy, and Chitralekha said, "What did he look like?" "Oh, I can't describe him." "Okay, did he look like this? Did he look like this?" And she drew all pictures of every male in the universe. Until she finally came to Aniruddha, Krishna's grandson. That's him. Okay, so this was the gift of Vyasadeva to Shukadev, and of course we get this all in the Srimad Bhagavatam and so much more. All right, any reflections on this? The purpose of this class was to just stress the value of hearing these multifarious topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, even if we don't always understand. It's not an academic process. It is a transformative heart process. That's the difference. Just let me take a moment more and differentiate the jnani and the devotee. You remember, what is the relationship between jnana and bhakti? Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yasu Vairagyam. Not only knowledge but detachment come automatically with bhakti. So the problem with jnana and just plain knowledge of the scriptures in and of itself is that it does not include the commitment to the relationship. Just like if somebody is considering a partner for marriage, you might do all kinds of research. Okay, I want to learn everything I can about this person before I commit to this relationship. Nothing wrong with that. But that's where the jnanis get stuck. They get stuck in just wanting to know before they make that commitment. You know, they can even come up to the mode of goodness. And of course, the mode of goodness, it means you're free of tada rajas tamo bhava kama lobha deyasche, the desires and attachments, lust. You're free of that, but it's still not entering the relationship with Krishna. See? That has to come from hearing and chanting. The example is given of going to the airport. So if you go to the airport, you are in a position to go somewhere on a plane. But if you don't get on the plane, then there's really no difference between you and people who are not at the airport. So the mode of goodness is like getting to the airport, but then we have to make that next commitment to actually have a relationship with Krishna. All right, so any reflections? Rihat Prabhu?
Yeah, question. It can be difficult for me to understand and relate with other languages, even if I try very hard. I've talked to you about this, and just hoping you can help me understand how to better go into the meaning. When I'm reciting Sanskrit prayers or Bengali prayers, how can I make it more heartfelt and not ritualistic?
Yes, we have to know the synonyms. That's the immediate answer, and that practically means learning a language. You know, we don't all have that intellectual capacity. My dear departed godbrother Sadhaputta Prabhu taught himself Sanskrit in Bhagavatam class. You know, in the back of each book there's a Sanskrit guide, all of Prabhupada's books, so he would patiently learn the letters during the classes, and that way he kept his very active mind engaged. So he learned the letters, and then he learned the words, and he would learn to read the Devanagari. And many people learn the language, especially some of my godbrothers and godsisters who lived in India or other places. But it's a big investment of time to learn a language. And so as a result, you have a diversion from the basic understanding. Occasionally, Srila Prabhupada would allow devotees to study Bengali or Sanskrit, but in general, he would discourage them from taking the time out for it. So we can learn the synonyms, we can repeat the translations, and of course, I know you're asking me this because you're asking me to plug my new book. Actually, Brihat Prabhu brought this up a couple of years ago and kind of challenged me. Why not put these bhajans into poetic English so we can sing the Bengali and then sing the English? So I've been working on that on your order the last year or so, and it's trying out some beta testing. It's got a good response. We sing the Bengali, then we sing the English, one and the other, and that way the meaning is more easy to absorb. But anyway, there are many ways to approach it. But it isn't. I used to think that every Indian in the audience, when I was singing a Bengali bhajan, every Indian knew exactly what they're saying. It was only me who didn't. And then I understood, no, not every Indian speaks Bengali. In fact, very few do outside of Bengal or Bangladesh. So, right, thank you for asking. Yeah. That's a commercial message. Now is over. Back to our regularly scheduled program. Yeah. Any reflections or thoughts? Yes, Prabhuji. Your good name?
Dr. Joseph.
Dr. Joseph, nice to meet you.
Hare Krishna. I found it interesting in the purport. It was talking about how Indra was cursed and took form as a hog and had trouble resuming his position back in the heavenly planets. I hadn't heard about this. Can you talk about how it applies to us?
Yes, again, Prabhupada just puts these little sutras in there. So the Brihaspati, one of the sages who gathered to see Bhishma, once cursed Indra for one or other of Indra's offenses. I forget which specific one. It's interesting because in the Rig Veda, Indra is often portrayed in a very noble and grand way, the king of the demigods. But in the Bhagavatam, practically all we see him is him getting in trouble in one way or another. Even when he's killing the demon Vritrasura, he's like being enlightened, getting lessons in his spiritual life. So Indra committed some offense. Brihaspati cursed him, you become a hog. And so he was demoted to that position, and he had his whole hog life going on, completely forgotten who he was. Meanwhile, in heaven, there was turmoil in his absence. So Brahma came and said, Indra, we really need you to come back. And Indra said, how can I leave hog heaven here? This is the story. I've got my family, I've got my mud, I've got my stool. How can I leave it? So that is the analogy of how the living entity is so attached to suffering in this world. We have so much suffering and so little enjoyment, but we don't want to give up the suffering at risking our enjoyment, not knowing there is a whole world of enjoyment that we're totally missing. Okay, thank you. Other reflections? Prabhupada Priya.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for, I was just reflecting that when you asked us to think of places in the Bhagavatam where these philosophical concepts were mentioned, we were throwing out names of personalities. So it just kind of struck me that we learn from people, and we learn philosophical concepts from looking at what people do and how their lives play out and the lessons that they learn and how those things apply to us. So the Srila Vyasadeva and all the speakers of the Bhagavatam were so expert that in giving these pastimes, they presented them through the lives of devotees or ordinary people or demons, or because we're personal. It just emphasizes the fact that we are persons. We're attracted to people. We learn from people. We are interested in people. So it just like totally defeats impersonalism, you know. It's all about people.
It's all about people, and then we remember the lessons from the people.
Yeah.
But yes, that's true in our lives, isn't it? We have Siksha gurus who we meet, and people, devotees, and we remember the lesson from the person. This person told me this person told me that. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Kunti Prabhu.
Just wanted to mention King Ambarish as being a very fine example of above being completely above the modes and completely transcendental. Even though Durvasa Muni was going through his rigors, he remained peaceful, and all he was thinking was, when can I feed Durvasa? That's all he was thinking.
Very good, thank you. Another personal example. Oh, we have a question here, yes. Shastra Krit's daughter, what is her name, Prabhu?
Danya.
Danya? Beautiful name. What's your question, Danya?
My question is, why does the Lord, how does he have supreme powers, and how does he have so many powers that he can change in different material bodies, change form?
Change forms. How does the Lord have so many powers that even allow him to change forms? How old are you, Danya? 4. That's a very good question, huh? Are you sure that, Shastra Krit Prabhu, this is not like you're a ventriloquist here? So, Danya, so one of the definitions of God is that he could do anything. And he wants to make himself available to all kinds of different people in different ways and different times. Even in forms that aren't even human beings. For example, like Kurma, he came as a turtle. And all the turtles in the world would be attracted by this great turtle. So he's always reaching out to us who are in this world and going through difficulties to try to help us in many different ways. Do your parents ever try to get you to do something you don't want to do? So how do they try to get you to do something you don't want to do?
You have to first make something fun.
Okay, they try to make it something fun. Okay? So this is why Krishna comes in these different forms, to try to make it fun and attractive. Okay? Is that all right? Yeah, Krishna can do anything. He can come in any form. And as soon as we say, God can't do that, then we put a limit on him, and he's unlimited. All right? Thank you very much. That was a great question. All right. Haribol. So it's 8:30. Well, that's right. Learning God Brothers, Anikarta Prabhu. Prabhuji, would you like to add anything? It's good to see you. Anikarta Prabhu. You know, I want to mention, did you use that melody at Kirtan this morning deliberately? Hare Krishna, Hare. Did you know that was Tamal Krishna Maharaj's favorite melody? Yeah. In the previous yuga.
In the car with me, we're going to France for a big Vyasa Puja. And he was practicing that melody. And yeah, it's a very beautiful melody.
It is. Tamal Krishna Maharaj.
Chintamani Prakarasa Masika Pravritya. Hare Krishna. Anyway, Hare Krishna.
Kunti, if I'm not mistaken, Tamal Krishna Maharaj made a recording of that melody, or had it made, and then he called it Surrender Loka. Remember that? So that melody just invokes that mood of surrender, helplessness. All right, thank you very much. Have a great Sadhu Sangha, everybody. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Radhakala Chandji ki jai. Please don't.